This is Gemara Nazir Daf Tes Zayin, another exciting day, Baruch Hashem, in the world of Daf Yomi, as we'll be concluding the second parak of Nazir. We pick it up from Tes Vavim and Beis, about 7 lines from the bottom. The first word line is Daraisa. As we said yesterday, that perhaps we don't have a raya that he holds Tumah Derabanan, because maybe Tumah Tahayim Deziva Yitiru, that even though when one is Tameh, he of course cannot bring the Karban Pesach. Perhaps Ziva is different. Perhaps the Tahayim of Ziva, the depth of the Ziva, would have a different halacha that you would yes be allowed to bring the Karban Pesach even with such Toma. And we continue today first wrapping things up. In the middle of the discussion that Rav Yosi holds that Mixas Hayom Kikulai, we had 2 different ways, I should say, of learning Rav Yosi yesterday. One being Mixas Hayom Kikulai, that you could be double counting. So says the Gemara today, Va'af Rav Yoshia Savar Limafreya Midrabon. Rav Yoshia also held, like Rav Yosi, that the Toma is going to be Limafreya and it's going to be a Din Derabon. And again, the Toma Limafreya, we're discussing that the person does the Shechita, the Karban Pesach, and then they become Tameh. So we have an ironic din that even though they can't eat the Karban Pesach tonight, they're still Pater from being in the Pesach Sheni. Why are they Pater from being in the Pesach Sheni? That's what the point that we're trying to figure out. So we answered it's Din Derabanan, that it works Limafreya, Midrabanan Limafreya, they become Tameh. Rav Yoshia agrees. The Tani Rav Yoshia Amar says Rav Yoshia, Haraya Zav Bishvi Shalai. If someone sees a Zav, a discharge of Zav, a male who sees some discharge, a sickness on the 7th day of his Zayin Akiyim, Seiser Eshalafanav, it messes up the days beforehand. Amar Le Rav Yochanan says, no, Loi Nistar Elo Yoimai, it only messes up that day. It does not mess up all the days prior. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Manashach. Isasar Kulu Sasar. What exactly is going on? How can you have this middle ground? What's Rav Yochanan mean? The loy nistar ella yoymai, where did that come from? Because if you're being sois to the Zayin Nikiyim, by definition, they're not Nikiyim. If they're not Nikiyim, then the whole block of 7 are not. And if not, not. So says the Gemara, ella ima, we have to explain Rav Yochanan holds loy nistar v'lo yoymai. Really, it doesn't say or anything. For Amar Lei, as we turn over to Tezayin Amid Aleph, Amar Lei Rav Yosi, and Rav Yosi said to him, Amar Lei Rav Yosi Koi Kavasech, said to Rav Yochanan, guess what? You're not alone over here. Rav Yosi concurs with you. Amar Mikan Ulaba Mitame, that it's going to be Mitame Mikan Ulehaba, and that's how we're going to have this unique duality. Yes, the Gemara in the second line for Rav Yosi Lemafreya Udamar. Rav Yosi said, it is Tami Lifar Mafreya. My Lemafreya, says the Gemara, Mide Rabbanon. So now we see that Rav Yoshia is learning very similar to the way that we learned Rav Yosi yesterday. Rav Yoshia concurs with that explanation. Says the Gemara, but now we have a technical sidebar issue. According to Rav Yosi, if it's always Tameh Limafreya Midrabanan, the Gemara is bothered how you ever going to get to the level of Zava Gidaila according to Rav Yosi. Says the Gemara, Rav Yosi Mechti, says the Gemara, according to Rav Yosi, 1 second, Mechti, Savar, Rav Yosi old, Mixas Hayom Kikulai. Rav Yosi holds part of the day counts as a whole day. So Zava Gemura Demaisi Karban Echi Mishkachatzla. How is there ever a case of a Zava Gedaila that could get to the level of Zava Gedaila that could have 3 Re'iyos that will come to a point that has to bring a carbon? What's the kasha? Because once she sees this second time, and whenever she sees that second time, it's the middle of the day. She sees the middle of the day. Idach balga diyayma, the other part of the day, salak leila shimar. She sees halfway through the second day. The second half of the second day should be counted towards a day of shimar, a day of cleanliness, a day of guarding. According to Rav Yaisi, mixas ayayim kikulai, says the Gemara, you're never going to be able to build up a case of 3 re'iyos of zava gedayla, according to Rav Yaisi. So answers the Gemara, 2 answers. Iba yisema tkashafa tlasa yaymi ba'adi adadi. Perhaps the easiest Sarah, it says the Gemara, no, it's talking about that she's mamish, flowing with blood. There's zava for 3 days straight, and there never was a moment of time straight. Meaning, you're right. If there was a point of the day that she was tahira and wasn't seeing blood, you're right, it would count as the whole day. You're right, it would mess up the 3 riyos. But there never was that moment of time. Teretz number 1. Iba Yisema, teretz number 2, the Chazi Talasa Yame Samach L'Shkias Achama. She saw 3 times before Shkia Dlavi Shahos Tisalik Leila Minyana. There was never a moment that could be counted, meaning at the end of the day, there never was that moment that was able, that could be counted as part of the day, to be counted as a clean day. Hadron Allah Chayreini Nazir. We should do an incredible chazara. I know that personally I am behind in the chazaras by a few days. I hope to catch up on those tonight. If anyone is still working with the 6-minute chazaras with me, Psiyata Dishmaya, we should do a beautiful chazara. We continue with a new Mishnah from a new parak, as you'll see a bit of a lengthy Mishnayis in this parak, and actually the breakup of the Mishnah is also interesting, but let's get to it. Says the Mishnah as we kick off the 3rd parak. Nazir. If someone says I'm a Nazir, and this should hopefully sound familiar, as we've had this quoted a few days ago. Misha Amar Dafei. He takes a haircut on day 31. This is part of the Stam Nazir's Gemaras over there. Let's say he took care on the 30th day, Yatza works. Let's say he explicates I'm a Nazir for 30 days. If he took haircut on the 30th day, then lo yatsa. He doesn't have 30 complete days. Case number 2 in the Mishnah. Misha Nazir shtei Nazirais. If someone makes 2 Nazirais, he gets a haircut the first one on day 30, on 31st. That's a shni on the second one, and Yom Shisha on day 61. And that's the way it should be. 2 complete Nazirais. However, says the Mishnah in Gilachas Arishayna Yom Shleishim, let's say the first one he took haircut on day 30, not 31. Then Ashniya Yom Shishim on day 60. Vem Gilach Yom Shishim Chaser. Let's say he took haircut day 59. Yatza, it's going to work. Vizu, and this is Eidos Eid Rav Papias. This is the testament that Rav Papias gave al Misha Nazir Shtei Nazirais. Someone who made himself 2 Nazirais, She'im Gilach Zarishayna Yom Shleishim, like we just said, he should have done on day 31. Let's say you did on day 30, then Megalech as Ashniya Liyom Shishim. But Gilach Liyom Shishim Chaser Echaz, if you did on day 59, Yatsa Yatsa. Why? Where does this halacha come from? Hopefully we're all anticipating the next words of the Mishnah. Sheyayim shel shleishim oile lohi mina minyin. Because a day 30 can count both ways. It counts for the first one and it can count for the second one. And therefore, b'di'eved, one would be able to get, if they took the haircut on day 59, it would work as well. Continues the Mishnah, Misha Marini Nazir. Someone says, I am a Nazir. Nitma Yom Shleishim. If they become tummy on the 30th day, Soiser as Hakol. It messes up the whole thing. Rav Eliezer Aimer says, Rav Eliezer, it doesn't mess up the whole thing, but rather, Einoi Soiser El Shiva. But if someone says, I read Nazir Shleishim Yayim, if he said again a Nazir, not, so the case of Stam was the first case. Now, if he said explicitly 30 days, Nitma Yom Shleishim, if he becomes tummy in the 30th day, Soiser as I call. Again, Harini Nazir Meya Yom, Nitma Yom on the 100th day, Soiser as I call. So the Tanakhama is sticking to his guns. But in this case of 100 day Naziris, Rav Eliezer Aimer Einoi Soiser Ella Shleishim. Not Shiva like we saw before, but here Rav Eliezer says Shleishim. Nitma Yom Ve'echad, if he becomes tummy on the day 101, Soiser Shleishim Yom comes Tameh for a full, if it messes up 30 days, he needs a full Nazirah. So Eliezer Aimer, Einoi Soiser, again, Ela Shiva. And when it says Shiva, what that means is, What's 7? 7 are the amounts of days to become tar from the tuma and then bring your carbon. So this Mishnah was basically a chazara on that which we learned back on Daf Hey, and now we dive straight into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Misha Merini Nazir v'nitma yom shleishim seiser as I call. Rav Eliezer Aimer Ein Seiser Ala Shiva. That's just quoting the case in the Mishnah that we're going to discuss. Says the Gemara as we turn over to Tezayin Amid Beis. What is the sheet of Rav Eliezer? What is the sheet who holds that Ein Seiser Ala Shiva Kasavar Rav Eliezer? You know what Rav Eliezer holds? Kol Achar Meleas Shiva Seiser. Anytime you're after the Meleos, you're after the completion of the term. Like in this case, when someone said, I'm a Nazir Stam. A Nazir Stam, we know, is 30 days. He didn't say how many days. Says Rav Eliezer, in such a case, what's going to be the halacha? If they become tamei, all it's going to be seiser is the 7 days of their tumah. Following the 7 days of the tumah, they'll be able to conclude their naziris. That is the shita of Rav Eliezer. This is going to be when it's on day 30, because day 30 is la'achar meleas, after the completion of the term. Says the Gemara, let's go to the next case in the Mishnah. 2 lines down to Zayin Beis, Hareini Nazir Shleishim Yahim, V'nitva Yahim Shleishim, they become Tamei on the 30th day. Soiser Esakol, comes Tamei all the days. Loi Polig Rav Eliezer. Rav Eliezer does not differentiate Tamar Shleimim. Why? Because in this case, the person said Shleimim, because the person said Shleimim. Therefore, it has to be a complete 30 days, and that's the reason why even Rav Eliezer is going to agree in this case that day 30 is part of the term of the Nazirs. Day 30 is not considered Achar Meleos. Therefore, Rav Eliezer is going to agree that it will be Soiser Es Hakol. Continues the Gemara 4 lines down to Zayin Amid Beis, the next case in the Mishnah. Harini Nazir Meya Yoim Initma Yoimeyam Soiser Es Hakol. What does it do? It messes everything up. Rav Eliezer Aimer Ina Soiser Ella Shloishim Ve'kula Kedavina Aliba de Barapada Ve'Rav Masna. Everybody who remembers, or Masna held a Stam Nazir Shloishim Yoim, or Barapada held that it's going to be 31 days. And that was the machlekes that we had back on Daf Hey Amid Beis. Again, Rav Masna, I'm actually looking back myself on the bottom of Hey Amid Aleph. Rav Masna says, Kodesh Yeh, everyone remembers that Yeh is the gematria of 30, and Barapada says that no, all the time says Nazir, Naziroi in the Torah, which is 29. Excuse me, I said Barapada is 31. Excuse me, it's 29 versus Rav Masna's 30. We continue with the Mishnah about 8 lines down to Zayin Beis. Mish and Nazir Beis Akvarais. Someone says he wants to be a Nazir and he's in a cemetery. We know a Nazir can become Dameh. Those days as he's sitting in a cemetery, what's he doing there? I don't know, maybe he's part of the Chaver Kadisha. Does not count for his Nazirs. But as well, he does not have to bring a carbon for becoming Tameh. Why not? Seemingly, it sounds like, because the Naziris wasn't Chal, because he's in the cemetery the whole time. Says the Mishnah, Yatzaf, he leaves the cemetery, V'nichnas, and he comes back in, then the days count for him, and as well, maybe Karban Tama. Seemingly very simple. When he leaves, the Naziris is Chal, because now there's a moment that he's not Tameh. Therefore, by entering back in, he becomes Tameh. He has to bring a carbon. Rav Eliezer Aimer loy boy b'yoyim. Not if it all happens on the same day. Shenemar v'yom harishanim yeplu ad shiyu lo yamim harishanim. Says Rav Eliezer, exiting and entering into the cemetery on the same day is not going to do anything for you. It's only if it's going to be on the next day. So that is the machlekes in the Mishnah. An interesting case, someone becoming a Nazir while he's in the cemetery, Naziris not being Chal, the fact that he's becoming Tameh, not requiring him to bring a carbon. When he leaves and enters, then he does. Says Rav Eliezer, not just Stam leaving and entering, but it has to be on a subsequent day. Says the Gemara, Itmar, Misha Nazar v'hu basic varis, sounding identical to the wordage of our Mishnah. We have a machlekes Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan Amar Naziras Chal Olav, says Rav Yochanan is Chal. Reish Lakish Amar Ein Naziras Chal Olav. There's no Naziras that is Chal in him. Explains the Gemara both opinions. Rav Yochanan Amar Naziras Chal Olav. The Naziras does fall on him. Savar Milsa Talye Vekaima. Says Rav Yochanan, you know the way that we view it. The Nazirus of Tahira is held, it's sitting there and waiting. Kivan de Mishkach Tahira Chaylia. The moment it finds Tahira takes effect. He doesn't have to do anything. So it's like, we'll call it pending, says Rav Yochanan. It's not that it's nothing. He's in a cemetery right now, so he can't be a Nazir. But the moment he steps out, boom, the Nazirus is going to fall on him like a lightning. Reish Lakish Amar, no, ain't Nazirus Chal Olav. There's no Nazirus on him. Ihadar v'amar. Then Chayli Aloi. Says Reish Lakish, if he says a new Kabbalah's Naziros, then he will be Chal Eloi Eloi. So according to Reish Lakish, says the Gemara, even if the person leaves the cemetery, the Naziros will not be Chal unless he has a real new Kabbalah's Nazirus. So Rav Yochanan says it's pending, falls in you as soon as you walk out. Reish Lakish says it's nothing, and therefore, unless you accept it upon again, it will be nothing. So we'll begin the question and answers between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Let's just get the first one under our belt before we call it a day. Eisvei Rav Yochanan who says it's pending, the Reish Lakish who says it's nothing. Our Mishnah, Misha Nazir vu basic varais. It doesn't count. Maybe Karban Tomo. What's the obvious implication of the Mishnah? Karban Tomo Delay Maisi. Sounds like the Nazir says Chal. He just doesn't bring the carbon because he haven't been in the cemetery the whole time. But it sounds like the Nazir says Chal. Amar Lei answers Reish Lakish, no. Einam b'toiras Toma. Ve'einam b'toiras Karban. You know what the Mishnah means? When it says Einam Mevi Karban Toma, means he's no shaykhis to him. Because it's not Chal at all. Eisvei, no, and we're going to stop over here. This will take us on to the next page. On to Daf Yomi. We'll pick up from here in the next year. B'siyata Dishmayo.